everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. I'm Brian Doyle.
I'm Tim McNeil.
And I'm Rob Rogers.
And he's damn glad to meet y'all. So today, guys, we've got there's some new regulation that's going into effect the week that this podcast is going to be out there in the marketplace. And that is the new FTC safeguards rule. And, we've been doing a little bit of promotion around that at VCIO Toolbox because we've seen a lot of our customers, believe it or not, many weren't aware that this regulation was going into effect. Certainly a lot of them don't know what it's all about. And, what we're going to talk a little bit about today is kind of, what this is all about and what it means to the MSP and where, as always, is the opportunity we're trying to uncover here for ourselves. So, kind of at a very high level, the FTC safeguards rule is now, a new rule that's been published into what was called, many of you might be familiar with, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which is really kind of a set of financial regulations meaning to oversight those that are transacting, financial dealings with customers. Think about things like loans, banking, investments. Those are the kind of things that are being covered. But there was a subset of customers out there, or a subset of marketplaces, I should say, or industry areas that weren't being covered at all. Kind of escaped the GLBA, didn't fall into HIPAA, didn't fall into, other, ISO could be an electable. It just didn't, they didn't have hopes. So one of the things that they're really trying to do is make sure that they get this into place. So really what the safeguards rule is about is helping financial institutions really make sure that they have measures in place to protect both financial information and personally identifiable information of those that they serve with the IT systems that they're managing or utilizing to transact business.
So Brian, so what you're saying is there were some, not loopholes, but some industries that were unregulated, didn't have guardrails, and they came in and just built a standard around those industries that were kind of unregulated in that point to bring them up to the standards of everybody else, to put them on the same field.
Yeah, and it's really a simplified standard too. It's not as in depth as a lot of the other frameworks are that many folks go into, but it's bringing some common sense principles that tend to have escaped this audience for a period of time. And we'll get a little bit more into what that means. And really, it's making sure that not only does this rule apply to the companies that are now covered under this, but that they're looking at their vendor supply chain as well and saying, hey, are the people we doing business at least managing their data in the same kind of way? So, it's that chain of custody is being protected as well as part of this process. Okay. So, if you want to look it up, the full regulation in the GLBA is 16 CFR Part 314. But the bottom line is, much to what Rob said, it's putting guardrails from a cyber risk perspective around companies that were unregulated until recently. And we'll get a little bit into who those companies are right now.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what are a couple of examples of those companies, industries?
I'll be interested to get your feedback when this list is done, because I think we'll all see something common and most MSPs have experienced as well. Who does it apply to? Auto dealers, mortgage lenders and brokers, payday lenders, collection agencies, tax preparers, non-federally issued credit unions, and non-SEC registered investment advisors. So when I look at that list, these have notoriously been groups. Now, I haven't dealt with all of them, but groups that tend to be technology laggards.
Yeah.
And turn their eyes away from security.
So it's funny. So it's funny you say that auto dealers are the first one. We've got a client that we work with actually on the sales maturity side that one of their focuses is the auto industry. And this guy, not that long ago, I'm talking within the last 8 weeks, he maybe a little bit longer, you can call it 8 to 12 weeks, somewhere in there. I was on a call with him and he had mentioned to me that there are about to be some new regulations coming out for the car industry or for the auto industry that is going to get them in line, but also create a lot of new sales opportunities for MSPs.
Yeah.
So, wow.
And when you look, go ahead, Rob.
It just seems like it's a heavy lift. Those are industries, in my opinion, that never want to spend anything on IT.
Yeah.
They are not looking to, grow any type of efficiencies or automations in their IT.
Well, there are even things that could be scarier than that. And here's where I go with this. So first, one thing I've neglected to say is it really also requires people to have at least 5,000 records that they're managing, right? For most of those industries that we just talked about there, that's not a heavy lift. People are constantly placing applications, even if they don't make the sale. And auto dealerships, we think about the marquee dealerships, right? The branded dealerships selling new cars. But now we're talking about that segment of used car dealers, secondary dealers too, that really haven't had guardrails on it. And, I'll say, look,
Wow.
in my checkered history, I had some investments in in an auto dealership once. And, when I was doing that, one of the things I also came to realize when I was coming in and kind of auditing, these guys are not necessarily good stewards of your information.
Yeah,
So
think
Social
about
Security, paper applications are still a huge part of what auto dealerships do, right? When you're in there and if you're making a deal, a lot of times they'll have, for a long time, it was paper applications. These applications get shopped to a lot, especially in, if you're talking about the subprime dealerships, right? People that are working with more challenged credit, cases out there in the marketplace. They're shopping those deals sometimes upwards of 7 or 8 banks to get the deal funded because of some of the risk going on. And I've seen Social Security numbers put on pieces of paper, just left on desks inside the office, not totally put into the system. There's just common sense things.
I don't understand your.
Yeah, no, I mean, like in dealerships, everybody shares a PC and that PC doesn't have a login because nobody can remember a password. These are things that I used to hear routinely that now are finally being brought to light. And look, I'm not saying that's every dealership in America by any means or anything like that. But what I think people overlook is they are handling a lot of financial data. And some of these dealerships are even playing the bank. And they're doing, some of the weekly pay ones that you see out there, really actually doing the funding and being the bank to the people they transact with. So this is starting to put some protections around that. And I think if you look at the rest of the list, mortgage lenders, payday lenders, collection agencies, you can see very quickly they've got that same information. Collection agencies are continually selling these collections with your, well, hopefully not your information, Rob and Tim, but somebody else's to other vendors. And you don't know who they are because really everybody's just trying to make their buck and pass the buck if they can't make the collection, right?
Brian, what was it? What was the last one on the list?
So the last couple that you might not be aware of is non-federally insured credit unions and non-SEC registered investment advisors.
Wow.
So, when you think about that, there's a lot of credit unions that evolve that are tied to companies. Once upon a time, I managed a credit union that when I had my MSP that supported Unilever back in the day. And, it was Unilever only credit union. You had to be a family member or them. So, because they were very specific, almost like a friends and family brokerage, which is really what we're talking about with non-registered investment advisors. They were handling all that information, but they weren't held by the same federal guidelines because they weren't federally chartered. They were there at the convenience of the organization. Non-SEC registered investment advisors tend to be those family-based brokerages, those
like
fund-based brokerages, that are out there as well. So, again, this is just, we've talked a little bit about who it applies to, but what they're really trying to do is just make sure that there's a basic level similar to the CIS, implementation group number 1 that we've spoken about in the past, but a basic level of opportunity or security. And some of the things that you need to put in there in order to satisfy this rule. You got to delegate a qualified individual to be your information security leader. So, it's almost like when you're in court and the expert witness just needs to know more than everybody in the room. This person needs to be the designated security person for their organization, but they can reach out for help from the MSP. So their opportunity number 1 is the MSP can help be an advisor, a guider on security and vCISO style, offerings to help support this need. They have to develop a written risk assessment. So they really have to do a risk assessment of their business. And most of these groups have not really sat down and done that because they haven't been held to it. Risk comes in many forms. We all have inherent risk that we have within our businesses, but then we have to determine, are those risks high enough to actually take action? And those risks can be specific things. We don't have MFA, implemented. That's an obvious technology risk there. Some of them are a little bit more holistic. Hey, can we be hit with an earthquake? Well, if you're in the center of the country, you're probably deeming that a pretty low risk kind of thing. But if you're in California, you might put that as a medium risk, right? So each company has to do its own risk assessment and look at, external factors, both technological and just general risk, and determine how that's going to impact their businesses.
So, Brian, what's the timeline for implementation here on this?
Well, this has already been extended once. So this was supposed to go into effect on December 9th of 2022. And now it's going live on June 9th of 2023. And at this stage, that will not get pushed out again.
Okay, so now it's coming on
action. Immediate action.
All right, so it's coming out. It's coming out really soon.
3 days from the day you'll be hearing this.
That's right. What can I, as an MSP business owner, do to utilize this information to create a campaign and drive some revenue from this?
So let's talk about the things that they really have to do. So those were some bigger holistic ones they have to do. But they have to make sure that they have basically least privilege. They know that they're limiting any of the customer sensitive information to just those that actually need that to do their job. So really, we're talking finance managers, people like that now need to be the only ones that are getting to see that kind of data, right? Again, I'm using auto dealers as kind of the leading conversation piece because I know so many MSPs are working with them, right?
Yeah.
You got to encrypt all your sensitive information. So, on those old ancient XP desktops that those second tier dealers won't get rid of, it's time to get rid of them because you got to encrypt those desktops if they're storing any detail or any information. A lot of that information is found in, for auto dealers and dealer management systems, which obviously have that encryption working on the back end, but you still got to have controls on access there. Developing an incident plan, teaching your personnel on security terms. So there's a nice opportunity for security awareness training, right? Building your security awareness, portion of your stack into their world. They have to look at the security practices of the service providers. They really have to start, guiding their customers that they have to look at the downstream security of some of their providers. And some of those guys are local providers. Could be huge opportunity for referrals as you go through this too, and getting introduced to other people. The guy that sells tires in your neighborhood, the guy that, paints cars, all these other trades that kind of feed into the supply chain. And then, the most obvious one is multi-factor authentication. You've got, for some of these guys that say, first you got to get in actual passwords and unique ones for everybody. And then you've got to put multi-factor authentication into it. So there's really, I think there's 16, it could be 17 base requirements that you have to do. We can put a link in so you can download this guide and know exactly what you got to do. But really, it's common sense stuff. Make sure you got your authentication in place. Make sure you've got least privilege on everybody's accounts where they can only go to what they need to for their jobs. Encrypt your data. Have somebody that's kind of in charge checking in. Have a security awareness program, train your staff, and then you can do some, and then, within there, there'll be subsets of things like social engineering. You should, especially if it is a business that, has a lot of transient personnel to them. A lot of those mortgage brokers and auto dealers have people that come and go very quickly from their organization. That you're calling on the phones too, and you're testing with phishing emails and you're testing with phishing phone calls to see if information can be given up. And I think what you're really listening to here is it's bringing this collection of people that a lot of us deal with on the regular, right? We all buy cars. We all, most of us have homes and have bought more, gotten at least our first mortgages, out there in the marketplace. We deal with different investment advisors in our life. We deal with a lot of the groups that we talked about here, and how do we make sure that our needs are being protected too? So this has finally kind of captured those folks that were escaping that area and giving them something to work on. And for the MSP, it opens opportunities with the laggards. I know when I dealt with some of the smaller auto dealers, they just didn't have the funds to put in the firewalls that you wanted them to, or the upgrades, or get off the Netgear equipment across the board. And certainly putting in usernames and passwords and managing and terminating those usernames and passwords when people left was not happening often. And, this is going to allow them to at least get controls that should already be in place, kind of forcing them to do it.
So it goes into effect on the 9th. Is that a drop dead date? You have to be up to date at that point, or
it's like
some sort of leeway time?
No, there's no leeway, because that's why they pushed it out.
That's why they pushed it.
Theoretically, you have to have your plan in place on how you're going to get there if you couldn't do it already by now. So you got to have that plan of action. And obviously this is a huge assessment opportunity for a customer.
Yeah.
But for your MSPs, and this is a easy enough assessment. It's not going to be a heavy lift for the MSP. There's, like I said, there's really 17 things that they're going to assess on, far less than most of the other frameworks. But but it'll also allow them to generate some revenue there too. You can easily charge $1,500 for this and get a readiness assessment put together for those that didn't know that they needed to do it, who are now held to it as of June 9th.
Yeah. From a salesperson perspective, it's kind of a blue ocean, right? You've got this unlimited, generally speaking, especially if you're in some of those industries, that's a really easy intro, right? You get in front of the decision maker. One of the hardest things that a salesperson kind of figures out when they're making a call is, what's this call about? And that's a really nice intro.
Yeah. Your call should be as simple as, are you aware that you may be covered under the FTC safeguards rule? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Have you built your remediation plan yet? Yes or no? Right? If no to both of those, when can we meet?
I would take that a step further. If I were building out this plan, first thing I'd do is I would go to InfoUSA or one of those lead list places and figure out all the SIC codes of each of those business verticals. Download that list, and I would download the list with the emails, clean it through Neverbounce. Then I would build out that campaign, throw that list out, and I would do the same thing you did. Just say, hey, look, we can do a free assessment with all these new safeguards. Use the 17-point checklist, and then I would email and then follow up on that email with a calling cadence. And that's how I would start this campaign. But this needs to be a campaign that you do immediately to beat everybody else.
Yeah.
And again, look, people are out there doing this. We're not, we're not bringing this to light. So, the opportunity's there. You got to move quickly, I think, with it. But, I'm also talking to the MSP that has these folks. Have you been out to them, knowing that you've probably wrestled what many of us have wrestled with, which is these guys never want to spend money. They want to slow down. They don't want to do this. Well, now they kind of have to. Now, to be fair, let's kind of we're talking about the positives. Let's just talk about kind of the reality. Just like when HIPAA first hit the marketplace. It's going to take time for this thing to get policed appropriately, right? So, get your POAM in place, start building out these projects, make them aware they got to do it. They understand they have to do it, and they're going to be more likely to do it. But nobody's going to be knocking on their door on the 10th.
Correct.
Going, are you FTC safeguard, ready at this stage, right? Just like the Office of Civil Rights, you had doctors that were like, yep, you know what? It might take them until I actually have to retire. So I'm not going to put in that firewall back when HIPAA came in the mid 2000s.
Oh yeah,
I'm not going to spend 25 grand on IT. If that's the maximum fine, I'll just wait then. And when the fine comes, I'll retire.
Yeah, there were, and that was real.
No, that was real. Because they were like, I don't think they're going to come find me anytime soon. And that's kind of one of the negatives. But what I will say is, obviously, when HIPAA first released, cyber threats were not what they are today.
It's a little different world.
There wasn't the level of cyber terrorism that's out there. There wasn't the amount of bad actors that are out there. And now there's money being invested into the supporting folk that have to, actually police this. So, I don't think this one will quite be at that level, but this is going to be something that you can get those laggards, those people that have dragged their feet on doing the right thing, to at least say, yeah, I guess I got to do it now and invest that money.
I will say one of the things that we used to, use casually when we were in conversations, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has a wall of shame now for HIPAA, and your office and the fine that you paid in your county and state is now listed on the internet from the Department of Human and Health, Services. So we used to use that. We used to use that as an example of companies who had failed and needed a call from us to see if they needed us to get in there and help. So we used to use that list all the time. And I bet you this comes out with a list eventually too, a wall of shame,
Good lead list.
Yep.
It was very much like when sounds very much like when we used to use the cross street index in obituaries when I was selling insurance. But hey,
I couldn't have done that, Brian. There's no way I could have done that. I would have walked in the door, they would have told me what I needed to do, and I would have walked back out. I couldn't have handled that one.
I was 22. You do what you're told back then.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right. So, I think that's really it. One of the things we can do is we can give you a link to a guide that we put together for the FTC safeguard rules. We'll put that onto the website. Certainly if you want to get more structured with it, not meant to be a commercial, but that's one of the things that VCIO Toolbox can do for you, make it very repeatable, and you can get everybody into your system and really be able to see across your customers that need the FTC safeguards, who's meeting muster and who's not. So, whether you do it that way, do it Excel checklist, utilize a tool, the point is the conversation needs to be had. And that's really what you need to be doing right now, because there are projects and service dollars.
All right. Well, Brian, as we kind of wrap up here, what is going to be the link that we're going to put on LinkedIn, our LinkedIn post for this?
Of course, you're going to ask me that. Now I got to look that one up.
So we're going to put the link on the LinkedIn post. How about we're going to
put the link on the LinkedIn post, but I will tell you, it's Go VCIO Toolbox. I think it's just Go VCIO Toolbox /FTC, but we will put that link in there.
Okay.
Cool.
It's a good little resource, Brian.
Yeah. We put it out there and I was shocked. We had almost 100 downloads of it on the first day.
Did you really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
There's just a lot of people that are just looking for some simple information on how to take advantage of this.
And how to build it up. That's
really what sparked this being our conversation today. It's obviously, right out in front of us.
Yep.
It's a sales opportunity, baby.
All right. Very good. Well, Brian, we really appreciate having you on the call with us here today. It was some fascinating information about the new FTC guidelines. We really appreciate it. We will be putting your information on our LinkedIn profile and anywhere that you can get your podcast, to include mspbusinessschool.com. Brian, before we break away, is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, it's been great being a guest on this show, man. I enjoy when I get to do that.
Great.
And Tim, yes, I agree with what you just put up there, but we're going to keep that one to ourselves. That's the inside joke.
All right, everybody. I've pretty much done everything I can to ruin this conversation in this podcast today. I appreciate you both being on, and I'll talk to you next time.
See you all next week.
Have a good one.